The stars trembled as 10,000 warships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. Each vessel stretched over 2 kilometers long, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets. The largest ship, the flagship, Eternal Dominion, dwarfed even these giants. From its command bridge, Admiral Vexithara gazed at the primitive star system spread before her fleet. "Target confirmed, Admiral," reported her tactical officer, his scaled hands dancing across holographic displays. "Third planet from the star. The inhabitants call it Earth." Vexithara's 4 eyes studied the blue-green world on the main screen. Such a small, insignificant planet to require such a massive force. But the Hegemony High Command had been clear in their orders. This species, these humans, showed disturbing signs of rapid technological advancement. Better to crush them now before they became a problem. The Admiral's species, the Kethmori, had served as the Hegemony's military arm for over 3,000 years. They had conquered worlds beyond counting, bringing the light of civilization to backward species across the galaxy. Most surrendered without firing a shot once they saw the size of the invasion fleet. The smart ones did anyway. "What do we know about their military capabilities?" Vexithara asked, settling her massive frame into the command chair. "Primitive nuclear weapons, Admiral. Chemical rockets barely capable of reaching their moon. They have some orbital stations and a few exploration vessels, but nothing that could threaten even our smallest frigate." The tactical officer paused, consulting his datapad. "Intelligence estimates their entire military could be neutralized within the first hour of engagement." Vexithara nodded. It was always the same story. These young species thought they were the masters of their tiny corner of space until the hegemony arrived to show them the truth. The galaxy belonged to the strong, and humanity was about to learn just how weak they really were. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving transmissions from the planet, multiple languages, but our translators are adapting quickly." "Put it through," Vexithara ordered. The bridge speakers crackled to life with a chaos of human voices. Fear, confusion, desperate attempts to understand what was happening. Some voices tried to establish contact, others shouted orders in what sounded like military frequencies. Through it all, Vexithara heard something that made her mandibles click. In amusement, defiance. These little creatures actually thought they could resist. How entertaining. "Shall I prepare the standard surrender broadcast, Admiral?" asked the communications officer. "Yes, but take your time. Let them look at our fleet for a while first. Fear makes them more reasonable." On Earth, the reaction was everything Vexithara expected and more. Their primitive detection systems had finally noticed the massive fleet sitting at the edge of their solar system. Radio chatter increased dramatically as their leaders tried to comprehend what they were facing. President Sarah Chen stood in the emergency command center, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, staring at the tactical display that showed 10,000 red dots arranged in perfect formation. Each dot represented a warship larger than anything humanity had ever built. "How long do we have?" she asked General Morrison, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they faced. "They're holding position at the edge of the system. Could be here in days, maybe hours if they decide to accelerate." Morrison was a career military man who had seen combat on 3 continents, but nothing had prepared him for this. "Options? Honestly, ma'am, we don't have any good ones. Our best military satellites are confirming the size of those ships. Each one could probably destroy every major city on Earth." Around the world, similar conversations were taking place in bunkers and command centers. In Moscow, Beijing, London, and every capital city, leaders grappled with the impossible reality that humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and their new neighbors had come calling with the largest military force in human history. Dr. Emily Rodriguez, head of the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence program, had dreamed of this moment her entire career. First contact with an alien civilization, but not like this, never like this. The ship configurations suggest a hierarchical military structure, she explained to the Emergency United Nations Assembly via secure video link. The largest vessel is clearly a command ship. The formation patterns indicate a sophisticated understanding of space warfare. Can we communicate with them? Asked the Secretary General. We've been trying. Multiple frequencies, mathematical, progressions, even basic pictographs. They're definitely receiving our transmissions, but so far no response. High above Earth's atmosphere, Commander Jake Sullivan watched the alien fleet through the observation port of Orbital Station Alpha. His small crew of 12 had been preparing for a routine supply mission when the aliens arrived. Now they were humanity's front line, whether they wanted to be or not. Any word from Houston? Asked his pilot, Lieutenant Maria Santos. They're still trying to figure out what to do. Can't say I blame them. Sullivan had been in space for 8 years, longer than any active astronaut. He'd seen Earth from orbit thousands of times, but never had it looked so fragile, so vulnerable. The alien ships hung in space like dark omens, their very presence changing everything humanity thought it knew about its place in the universe. Sullivan wondered if his daughter back in Texas could see them with a telescope. Probably not yet, but soon the whole world would know that the universe was a much more crowded place than anyone had imagined. Back on the flagship, Vexthera decided enough time had passed. The humans had seen their fleet, understood their hopeless position. Now came the offer of mercy. "Open a channel to the planet," she commanded. "All frequencies." The communications officer nodded, and Vexthera stood to deliver the message she had given to dozens of worlds before. "People of Earth," her voice boomed across every radio, television, and communications device on the planet, automatically, translated into every human language. "I am Admiral Vexthera of the Hegemony Fleet. Your world has been selected for integration into our glorious empire. On Earth, billions of people stopped what they were doing to listen to the impossible. Voice from space. You have one planetary rotation to consider our generous offer. Surrender unconditionally, and your species will be preserved as productive members of hegemony society. Your leaders will be educated in proper governance. Your resources will contribute to the greater good of the galaxy." President Chen closed her eyes as the alien's words washed over her. Around the emergency command center, advisors and generals waited for her response. "Resist," Vexthera continued, "and we will demonstrate why 1,000 civilizations have chosen wisdom over destruction. Your primitive weapons cannot harm our vessels. Your orbital installations exist only by our mercy. Choose carefully." The transmission ended, leaving Earth in stunned silence. Vexthera settled back into her command chair, satisfied. Within hours, the human leaders would contact her to discuss terms of surrender. They always did. The alternative was simply too terrible to contemplate. But deep in her command bunker, President Chen was already issuing orders that would have surprised the alien admiral. Orders to activate defense systems that officially didn't exist. Orders to deploy weapons that had been built in secret over the past 20 years. Ever since scientists first detected unusual signals from deep space. Humanity had been preparing for this day longer than the hegemony realized. The stage was set for a battle that would reshape both species' understanding of war, courage, and the true meaning of victory. In 18 hours, Admiral Vexthera would learn that some species fight harder when cornered, and that the most dangerous enemy is one with nothing left to lose. 24 hours after the ultimatum, Admiral Vexthera still waited for humanity's surrender. She had expected their leaders to contact her within hours, begging for mercy and offering terms. Instead, she received only silence from the small blue planet. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "we're detecting increased activity on the planet's surface, multiple launch signatures." "Primitive rockets," Vexthera dismissed with a wave of her clawed hand. "Probably evacuation attempts. Scan for any transmission indicating surrender." but the tactical officer's next words wiped the amusement from her features. "Admiral, we have a problem. Long-range sensors are detecting weapon signatures. The humans appear to be targeting our fleet." Vexathara's 4 eyes narrowed. "Impossible. Their weapons couldn't reach us at this distance." The main display shifted to show dozens of objects accelerating toward the hegemony fleet. They moved faster than any human technology should allow, following intercept courses that suggested sophisticated targeting systems. "Time to impact?" she demanded. 17 minutes for the first wave, Admiral. 43 minutes for the second." Vexathara studied the tactical display with growing confusion. The objects were too small to be ships, too fast to be chemical. Rockets. What were these humans thinking? Signal the third battle group. Move them forward to intercept these toys. Show the humans what real weapons can do. A formation of 50 hegemony destroyers broke from the main fleet, their fusion drives burning bright as they accelerated toward the incoming objects. Each destroyer carried enough firepower to sterilize a continent. Destroying a few primitive missiles would be trivial. But as the destroyers moved into interception range, something unexpected happened. The human missiles didn't try to evade. Instead, they accelerated toward the hegemony ships with suicidal intensity. Point defense systems engaged, filling space with energy beams and projectiles. Most of the human weapons were destroyed before they could reach their targets. Most, but not all. The lead destroyer, the Swift Retribution, managed to intercept 3 missiles before a 4th slipped through its defenses. Vexathara expected to see a small explosion, maybe some minor damage to the destroyer's shields. Instead, a miniature sun bloomed in space. The nuclear warhead, primitive by galactic standards but devastating at close range, overwhelmed the destroyer's shields and tore through its hull. The ship's reactor containment failed, adding its own explosive death to the human weapon's fury. In seconds, one of the hegemony's finest warships became an expanding cloud of superheated gas. "What was that?" Vexathara whispered, staring at the empty space where her destroyer had been. Before anyone could answer, more explosions lit up the void. The humans had packed their missiles with nuclear warheads, turning each one into a ship killer. The hegemony's advanced shields, designed to deflect energy weapons and kinetic projectiles, offered little protection against weapons that turned matter itself into energy. 6 more destroyers died in the first exchange. "Admiral," the tactical officer's voice cracked with disbelief. "We've lost 7 ships. The humans are using atomic weapons." Vexathara felt something she hadn't experienced in decades of warfare: surprise. These primitive creatures were actually fighting back. Not only fighting, but drawing blood. "Recall the third battle group," she ordered. "Reform defensive positions." But the humans weren't finished. From behind Earth's moon, where hegemony sensors couldn't detect them, a new threat emerged. Ships began decloaking, dozens of them, sleek and angular compared to the organic curves of hegemony vessels. They had been hiding, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Commander Jiang Wei aboard the stealth frigate Beijing's Fury watched as his orders came through on the encrypted channel. 20 years of secret construction, 20 years of preparing for this day. Earth's governments had learned to cooperate when faced with the possibility of alien invasion. The ships they built were crude compared to what was bearing down on them, but they carried humanity's best weapons and most determined crews. "All ships, this is Beijing's Fury," Jiang transmitted on the secured frequency. "Execute Operation Broken Arrow. For Earth." The human fleet accelerated toward the alien formation, their nuclear engines pushing them to speeds that made their crews' bones ache. They weren't trying to match the aliens' technology. They were trying to get close enough to use humanity's oldest military tactic: get in close and hit hard. Vexathara watched in fascination as the human ships approached. They were clearly outmatched, clearly outgunned. Any rational species would have turned back. Instead, they kept coming. "Target the lead vessels," she commanded. "Show them the futility of resistance." Hegemony beam weapons reached out across space, striking the human ships with devastating accuracy. Hulls buckled and atmosphere vented, but the surviving ships didn't slow down. If anything, they accelerated. The Beijing's Fury took a direct hit that tore away half her port side, but Commander Zhang kept his ship on course. His crew worked frantically to maintain engine power and weapon systems, their faces grim with determination. "Sir, we've lost life support on decks 3 through 7, his first officer reported. "Seal the compartments and keep firing," Zhang replied. "We only need to last long enough to get close." The human strategy became clear as the first ships reached the hegemony formation. They weren't trying to win a traditional space battle. They were turning themselves into guided missiles, ramming their nuclear-powered ships directly into the alien vessels, the destroyer. Endless victory never saw it coming. The human ship Solar Wind, her hull breached and atmosphere bleeding into space, slammed into the destroyer's command section at a significant fraction of light speed. Both ships vanished in a blast that briefly outshone Earth's sun. More human. Ships followed, their crews accepting certain death to take alien vessels with them. Some carried experimental weapons cobbled together from civilian technology. Others simply relied on the devastating power of their own destruction. Captain Sarah Kim aboard the fusion transport Prometheus made her final entry in the ship's log, as she guided her vessel toward a hegemony cruiser. "This is Captain Kim. We're about to attempt ramming speed against alien vessel designated Tango 7. If anyone finds this log, tell my family I'm proud to die for Earth. Tell them we didn't. Go quietly." The Prometheus struck the cruiser amidships, her fusion reactor breaching on impact. The explosion tore the alien ship in half and sent debris scattering across 1,000 kilometers of space. On the hegemony flagship, Admiral Vex Thara struggled to comprehend what she was witnessing. In 30 years of military service, she had never seen anything like this. These humans were fighting with a ferocity that defied all tactical logic. They sacrificed their ships and lives without hesitation, each death buying time and inflicting damage on the hegemony fleet. "Casualty report," she demanded. 23 ships destroyed, Admiral. 41 damaged, 12 critically." The tactical officer's voice shook. "The humans have lost approximately 60% of their fleet, but they're still attacking. Still attacking." After losing most of their ships, after seeing their comrades die, the remaining humans kept fighting. Vexathera had conquered species that surrendered after losing a single vessel. These creatures seemed to grow more dangerous as their losses mounted. A new alarm sounded across the bridge. The sensor operator looked up with wide eyes. "Admiral, we're detecting massive energy signatures from the planet's surface. Hundreds of them. On Earth, missile silos hidden across every continent opened simultaneously. The weapons they contained had been built in absolute secrecy, funded by a coalition of nations that had put aside their differences when faced with the possibility of extinction." President Chen stood in the command center, her hand hovering over the final authorization. "Key, Madam President," General Morrison said quietly. "Once we fire these, there's no going back. They'll know we've been preparing for war." Chen looked at the tactical display showing the burning remains of humanity's first space fleet. Good people had died up there, died buying time for this moment. "General, I think they already know." She turned the key. Across Earth, 1,000 missile silos erupted. The weapons they launched were humanity's answer to superior alien technology. If you can't match their sophistication, overwhelm them with raw firepower. Each missile carried multiple nuclear warheads, and each warhead was designed with one purpose in mind: to kill alien ships. Admiral Vex Thara watched the cloud of missiles rising from Earth's surface and felt something she had never experienced. In battle before, fear. These weren't just primitive weapons. The targeting solutions were too precise, the launch coordination too perfect. These humans had been planning this battle for years, maybe decades. They had let the hegemony believe they were helpless while secretly preparing for war. All ships, "Evasive maneuvers," she commanded. "Deploy countermeasures." But there were too many missiles, coming from too many directions. The hegemony fleet, designed for elegant battles between civilized species, found themselves in a brawl with an enemy that had no concept of civilized warfare. The missiles reached, the fleet in waves, each one a message written in nuclear fire. Earth would not go quietly into the dark. The battle had been raging for 3 days, and Admiral Vexathera no longer recognized the space around Earth. Where once her perfect formation of 10,000 ships had hung in orderly ranks, now scattered groups of damaged vessels fought desperately against an enemy that refused to die. The humans kept coming. Wave after wave of missiles rose from Earth's surface. When those ran out, they launched everything else they could find: converted cargo ships packed with explosives, orbital construction, equipment turned into kinetic weapons. Even old space stations abandoned and forgotten suddenly came alive with skeleton crews steering them toward hegemony targets. "Status report," Vexathera demanded, her usual composure cracking under the strain of the longest battle of her career. 4,237 ships remaining operational, Admiral, her tactical officer reported. Another 800 require major repairs before they can return to combat effectiveness. 4,000 ships lost. In 3 days of fighting against a species that barely qualified as spacefaring. The hegemony had conquered entire star systems with fewer casualties. What about the humans? Difficult to determine, Admiral. They keep launching from new positions. Our estimates suggest they've expended 70% of their initial arsenal, but they continue to produce new weapons at an alarming rate. Vexathera studied the tactical display, trying to understand the madness she was witnessing. Every military doctrine she had ever learned said the humans should have surrendered by now. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and facing certain defeat, yet they fought on with a determination that bordered on insanity. A communications alert drew her attention. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the planet. It appears to be from their military leadership." "Put it through." The image that appeared on the main screen showed a human female in military uniform. Her face was streaked with dirt and fatigue, but her eyes burned with uncompromising resolve. "I am General Patricia Morrison, acting military commander of Earth. Defense Forces," the human said. "I have a message for the alien commander." Vexathera activated the response channel. "I am Admiral Vexathera. Speak." "You came here expecting easy prey, Admiral. You thought we would kneel before your superior, technology, and beg for mercy." Morrison's voice carried across space with cold determination. "You were wrong. Your resistance is pointless, General. You have cost us ships, yes, but you cannot win. Surrender now, and I will allow your species to survive." Morrison smiled, and the expression sent an unexpected chill through Vexathera. "Admiral, you still don't understand. We're not trying to win. We're trying to make you bleed. Every ship you lose weakens your empire. Every day this battle continues. Other species in your territory hear about it. How long before they start to think that maybe the mighty hegemony isn't so mighty after all?" The transmission ended, leaving Vexathera staring at an empty screen. The human was right, of course. Word of this battle would spread. Subject species would begin to question hegemony's strength. But what choice did she have? The High Command had ordered Earth's conquest, and failure was not an option. "Admiral," the sensor operator called out, detecting new movement from the planet. Multiple large objects breaking orbit. The main display shifted to show massive shapes rising from Earth's surface. They were crude, ugly things compared to hegemony. Vessels clearly constructed from civilian infrastructure. Massive cargo haulers, ocean-going ships somehow fitted with rocket engines, even what appeared to be sections of orbital elevators. "What are they doing?" Vexathera whispered. Her question was answered as the first of the converted ships reached weapons range. Its cargo bay doors opened, revealing not weapons but people. thousands of humans in spacesuits, each one carrying some kind of personal propulsion device. "By the ancestors," the tactical officer breathed. "They're using their civilians as weapons. The humans weren't civilians in the traditional sense. They were volunteers, engineers, and construction workers, and retired military personnel, all united in their determination to protect their world. Each one carried a backpack nuclear device, a crude but effective bomb designed to breach ship hulls. Commander Elena Vasquez led the first wave of what Earth's military had designated boarding torpedoes. Her construction crew had been building orbital habitats just a week ago. Now they were humanity's latest weapon in an impossible war. "Remember, people," she said over the tactical network, "we don't need to take their ships. We just need to break them. Get to their reactor rooms, their command centers, their life support systems. Make them hurt." The human swarms descended on the hegemony fleet like angry bees, too small and numerous for ship weapons to target effectively. They landed on hulls, cut through armor with industrial tools, and disappeared into the alien vessels. Aboard the heavy cruiser, Glorious Purpose, Commander Ketval felt his ship shudder under multiple impacts. "Security teams to all hull breaches," he ordered. "Repel boarders." But the humans weren't trying to capture his ship. They were trying to destroy it from the inside. Explosions echoed through the corridors as human saboteurs detonated their charges in critical systems. The ship's power grid failed, then its artificial gravity, then its life support. "Abandon ship," Ketval finally ordered, but it was too late. The humans had reached the reactor room. The Glorious Purpose vanished in a ball of fusion fire, taking its human attackers with it. This scene repeated across the fleet as humans sacrificed themselves to cripple hegemony vessels. They fought with tools never designed for combat, using welding torches as weapons and construction explosives as bombs. Many died without accomplishing their mission, but enough succeeded to turn the tide of individual battles. Captain Maria Santos had been a civilian transport pilot before the war. Now she guided her converted freighter through the wreckage of dozens of ships, hunting for targets of opportunity. Her cargo hold was packed with volunteers carrying mining charges, each one willing to die to damage the enemy. "There!" Her navigator pointed at a damaged hegemony destroyer limping away from the battle. "Her shields are down and she's venting. Atmosphere." "Perfect." Maria smiled grimly. "Time to deliver the mail." Her ship slammed into the destroyer's hull with enough force to breach both vessels. In the seconds before the hull sections sealed, 50 humans poured through the gap, spreading through the alien ship like a virus. Within minutes, secondary explosions began tearing the destroyer apart from within. Watching from the flagship, Admiral Vexathara finally understood what she was truly fighting. These weren't just soldiers defending their territory. These were ordinary citizens who had decided that death was preferable to slavery. Every human seemed willing to sacrifice everything to protect their world. "Admiral," her chief medical officer, requested a private channel. "I've been analyzing the human tactics and physiology. I believe I know why they fight this way." "Explain." "Their brain chemistry is different from ours, Admiral. When threatened, they release chemical compounds that enhance aggression and reduce fear responses. But more importantly, their social structure bonds them to their offspring and communities in ways we don't fully understand. They're not just fighting for themselves. They're fighting for every human who will ever live." Vexathara considered this. The hegemony conquered through superior technology and overwhelming force. Individual species joined the empire because resistance was futile and life under hegemony rule was preferable to extinction. But humans seemed to view slavery as worse than death. They would rather destroy themselves than submit. "Status of the planetary bombardment preparations?" she asked. "Ready on your command, Admiral. We can begin systematic destruction of their population centers within the hour." Vexathara hesitated. Orbital bombardment was a last resort, used only when a species proved completely intractable. It would eliminate human resistance, but it would also eliminate most of the planet's value. The High Command wanted productive worlds, not radioactive wastelands. But continuing this battle was bleeding the fleet white. Every hour brought new human attacks, new casualties, new proof that these creatures would never accept defeat. "Begin bombardment of military targets only," she finally ordered. "Precision strikes to eliminate their manufacturing capability." The order was a compromise that satisfied no one. Limited bombardment wouldn't break human resistance, but it might reduce their ability to produce new weapons. It was a decision born of frustration and growing desperation. As hegemony orbital weapons began raining fire on Earth's surface, humanity prepared its next surprise. Deep beneath the planet's crust, where alien sensors couldn't penetrate, massive tunnels stretched between continents. Hidden factories continued producing weapons, while entire cities evacuated to underground shelters that had been decades in the making. The humans had been preparing for this war far longer than anyone realized. Every contingency had been planned for, every sacrifice calculated and accepted. Dr. Emily Rodriguez stood in the underground command center beneath Colorado's Rocky Mountains, watching displays that showed the alien bombardment beginning. Cities burned, but the strategic targets were mostly empty. Humanity had learned to hide its important assets deep underground, protected by miles of rock and metal. "Phase 3 is authorized," she announced to the assembled military. Admiral Vexithara stood before the holographic communication array, her 4 hands trembling as she prepared to make the most difficult report of her military career. The image of High Admiral Zethkara materialized before her, his ancient features, carved from living stone, eyes that had witnessed the conquest of 100 worlds. "Report, Admiral Vexithara," the High Admiral commanded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "High Admiral, the situation on Earth has become complex." Vexithara struggled to find words that wouldn't sound like the ravings of a broken mind. "We have lost 6,400 ships. The humans continue to resist with tactics we have never encountered." Silence stretched across the communication link. Finally, Zethkara spoke, his voice dangerously quiet. "You have lost more than half your fleet to a pre-spaceflight species? High Admiral, these humans are unlike any opponent we have faced. They fight as if death means nothing to them. They sacrifice themselves without hesitation, turn civilian infrastructure into weapons, and seem to grow more dangerous the more. We hurt them. Admiral, you will complete your mission or face court-martial for incompetence. The resources committed to this operation must not be wasted." The communication ended, leaving Vexithara alone with her failing command and the impossible task of defeating an enemy that seemed to thrive on destruction. Below, on Earth's scarred surface, Dr. Emily Rodriguez worked frantically in the underground laboratory that had become humanity's last hope. Around her, scientists and engineers from every nation labored to create weapons from theories that existed only in academic papers. "The quantum resonance field is stabilizing," called out Dr. Yuki Tanaka from the particle accelerator controls. "If our calculations are correct, this should disrupt their shield harmonics." Emily nodded, reviewing the data streams flowing across her displays. The weapon they were building violated several laws of physics, but humanity had learned to break rules when survival was at stake. The alien shields worked by redirecting energy along predictable patterns. The quantum disruptor would make those patterns impossible to maintain. "How long until we can deploy?" asked General Morrison, who had been coordinating the underground resistance since the orbital bombardment began. 12 hours, maybe less," Emily replied, "but we'll only get one shot. The energy requirements will drain our entire continental power grid." "Then we better make it count." Above ground, the battle continued with desperate intensity. Human resistance. Fighters emerged from tunnel networks to attack alien ground forces, using hit-and-run tactics that turned every city block into a potential battlefield. The hegemony troops, trained for conventional warfare between organized armies, found themselves fighting an enemy that was everywhere and nowhere. Sergeant Ketval of the 42nd Hegemony Marine Division crouched behind the rubble of what had once been a human library, his squad's energy weapons scanning for targets. They had been fighting in this city for 6 days, and the humans still hadn't been eliminated. "Movement 2 o'clock," whispered Corporal Dexthon. Ketval aimed his rifle at the indicated position, but saw only empty streets filled with debris. Then the debris moved. Humans emerged from underground passages, from ruined buildings, from sewage systems and subway tunnels. They carried weapons cobbled together from construction tools and household chemicals, but they moved with the coordination of veteran soldiers. The first human to reach the hegemony position was a teenage girl carrying what appeared to be a modified fire extinguisher. She sprayed its contents across the aliens' defensive line, and the chemical mixture ate through their armor like acid. "Fall back," Ketval ordered, but the humans were already among them, fighting with a ferocity that made no tactical sense. They accepted wounds that should have been incapacitating, continued fighting with broken bones and bleeding injuries, threw themselves at armed soldiers with nothing but improvised weapons. A human male, old enough to be someone's grandfather, detonated an explosive device strapped to his chest, rather than let the aliens escape to fight another day. 3 hegemony Marines died with him, and the rest of the squad retreated in disorder. This scene repeated across the planet as humans demonstrated a capacity for sacrifice that the hegemony couldn't comprehend. Every human seemed willing to die, to kill even one alien soldier. Every battle became a last stand, every engagement a potential suicide mission. In space, the patterns were the same. Human ships rammed alien vessels with suicidal determination. Human crews detonated their own reactors rather than allow their ships to be captured. Even when facing certain death, they kept fighting, kept inflicting casualties, kept making the hegemony pay for every meter of space. Admiral Vexathara studied the intercepted human communications, trying to understand the enemy she faced. The translation software had finally cracked their complex languages, allowing her to listen to their military coordination and civilian broadcasts. What she heard changed everything. "This is Maria Santos reporting from Sector 7, came one. Transmission. We've lost contact with the Johnson family, but their basement workshop is still producing ammunition. The children are helping load magazines while the parents work on the assembly line." Children. The humans were using their offspring in the war effort, not as soldiers but as support personnel. Every human, regardless of age or capability, contributed to the fight. Another transmission. "Memorial services for the 3rd Denver Volunteers will be held next Tuesday, assuming we're all still alive. They took 40 alien soldiers with them. When they made their last stand, their sacrifice will not be forgotten. The humans mourned their dead, but they also celebrated them. Death in battle wasn't seen as tragedy but as achievement. They were turning martyrdom into a weapon." "Admiral," her intelligence officer approached with a data pad. "We've completed analysis of human social structures. I think you need to see this." Vexathara reviewed the report with growing understanding and horror. Human society was built around concepts the hegemony had never encountered. Family bonds that superseded individual survival. Loyalty to abstract concepts like freedom and independence. The willingness to die for ideas rather than just territory or resources. "They're not fighting for their government," she realized aloud. "They're fighting for their children's future." It explained everything: the suicidal attacks, the civilian resistance, the refusal to surrender even when facing annihilation. The humans weren't protecting a political system or economic structure. They were protecting something the hegemony had never learned to value: the right to determine their own destiny. The communication alarm sounded, and Vexathara found herself facing another human leader on the main screen. This one was different. Younger, with the bearing of someone who had seen too much death but refused to be broken by it. I am President Sarah Chen, the human said. I believe it's time we talked, Admiral. There is nothing to discuss, Vexthara replied, though her conviction was weaker than before. Surrender unconditionally, and your species will be preserved. Preserved as slaves, Chen said. That's not preservation, Admiral. That's extinction with a different name. You cannot win this war. Your losses are unsustainable. Chen smiled, and the expression was both sad and terrifying. Admiral, you're still thinking like a conqueror. You measure victory in ships destroyed and territory captured. But we're not trying to conquer anything. We're trying to survive as free beings. Your freedom is meaningless if you're all dead. Our freedom is meaningless if we're all slaves. That's the difference between us, Admiral. You fight to expand an empire. We fight to remain ourselves. The transmission continued, and Vexthara found herself drawn into the most disturbing conversation of her life. The human president spoke of concepts that had no hegemony equivalent: the right to choose one's government, the importance of individual liberty, the belief that some things were worth dying for, even if victory was impossible. Your empire has conquered 1,000 worlds, Chen said, but has it ever created anything? Has it ever made its citizens happier, or safer, or more fulfilled? Or does it just grow for the sake of growth? Vexthara had no answer. The hegemony existed to expand. That was its purpose, its reason for being. She had never questioned whether expansion served any greater goal. We could have built something together, Chen continued. Humans and your people, sharing knowledge and resources as equals. Instead, you came here to make us kneel. You turned cooperation into conquest. The strong rule the weak, Vexthara said, reciting the first principle of hegemony doctrine. It is the natural order. The natural order according to whom? Your ancestors, who decided that might makes right? Admiral, what if they were wrong? What if there's a better way to organize galactic civilization? The conversation ended with both leaders no closer to agreement, but Vexthara found her certainties shaken. For the first time in her military career, she wondered if the hegemony's way was the only way. Around her, the flagship's bridge crew worked with mechanical efficiency, but she could see the doubt in their eyes. They had heard the intercepted transmissions, seen the human willingness to die for abstract principles. Some of them were beginning to ask the same questions that plagued their admiral. 3 weeks had passed since the first shot was fired, and Earth hung in space like a wounded animal, its surface scarred by orbital bombardment, its skies dark with smoke from burning cities. But still, impossibly, the humans fought on. Admiral. Vexthara stood in her command center, surrounded by the remnants of what had once been the greatest fleet in hegemony history. Of the 10,000 ships that had arrived to conquer a primitive world, fewer than 800 remained combat effective. The rest were debris, scattered across the solar system as monuments to human stubbornness. Admiral, her tactical officer reported with exhausted resignation, the quantum disruptor has been activated. On the main display, a new energy signature bloomed from Earth's surface. The beam that reached into space was invisible to normal sensors, but its effects were immediately apparent. Across the hegemony fleet, shield generators began failing as their harmonic frequencies became impossible to maintain. All ships, emergency power to defensive systems, Vexthara commanded. But she knew it was too late. The humans had waited until the fleet was weakest, most demoralized, before unveiling their final surprise. The last wave of human ships rose from Earth like angry spirits. These weren't converted civilian vessels or hastily assembled fighters. These were purpose-built warships, sleek and deadly, constructed in underground shipyards while the battle raged above. Each one carried weapons that shouldn't have been possible for such a young species to create. Captain John Harrison commanded the lead ship, the Indomitable, humanity's first true warship. His crew consisted of volunteers from every nation on Earth, united by the knowledge that this was their last chance to drive the invaders away. "All ships, this is Harrison," he transmitted to the human fleet. "Remember what we're fighting for. Not for victory, we're fighting so that someday human children will grow up free." The Indomitable's main gun fired, sending a stream of accelerated particles into the hull of a hegemony cruiser. The alien ship's shields, destabilized by the quantum disruptor, offered no protection. The beam tore through armor and superstructure, like paper, gutting the vessel in seconds. More human ships joined the attack, their crews accepting that this was a one-way mission. They had fuel for this battle and nothing more. Win or lose, none of them would return to Earth. Vexithara watched her fleet die ship by ship, each loss a testament to human ingenuity and determination. The creatures she had dismissed as primitive had created weapons that challenged hegemony technology, tactics that confounded military doctrine developed over millennia of conquest. "Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from the High Command," her communications officer announced. The holographic image of High Admiral Zeth Kara materialized, his ancient features twisted with rage. "Admiral Vexithara, explain how you have managed to lose an entire battle fleet to a species that builds with metal and combustion." "High Admiral, the humans are not what our intelligence indicated. They fight with a determination that—" "Silence." Zeth Kara's voice cut across, space like a blade. "You will withdraw immediately to the outer system and await reinforcements. This embarrassment ends now." "High Admiral, with respect, I believe we should consider negotiation. These humans are a cancer that must be excised before it spreads. You have your orders, Admiral." The transmission ended, leaving Vexithara with the bitter knowledge that the hegemony would never accept defeat. More fleets would come, larger ones, until Earth was nothing but radioactive ash. The humans had won this battle, but the war would continue until one species was extinct, unless someone chose a different path. "All ships prepare for emergency jump to Rally Point Gamma," she ordered. "Signal general retreat." The surviving hegemony vessels began charging their hyperspace drives, preparing to flee the system they had come to conquer. But Admiral Vexithara had one final message to send. "Open a channel to the planet," she commanded. "All frequencies." President Chen's image appeared on the screen, her face gaunt with exhaustion, but her eyes still burning with defiance. "Admiral, have you come to dictate new surrender terms?" "I have come to warn you," Vexithara said quietly. "My fleet is retreating, but others will follow. The High Command will not accept this defeat. They will send everything they have to destroy your world." Chen nodded slowly. "We know. We've always known this was just the beginning. Then why fight? Why condemn your species to extinction for a few more years of freedom?" Chen's smile was sad, but unbroken. "Because those few years matter, Admiral. Because every human who dies free is a victory over the idea that might makes right. Because somewhere in your empire, there are other species watching this battle and learning that even gods can bleed." Vexithara felt something she had never experienced before. Shame. Shame for the empire she served, for the countless worlds she had helped subjugate, for the civilizations that had died without ever knowing they could fight back. "Admiral," Chen continued, "some of your people will survive this battle. When they return to your empire, they'll carry stories of what they saw here. Stories of humans who chose death over slavery. Those stories will spread, and other species will start to ask questions about why they kneel to the hegemony." The transmission ended, leaving Vexithara with a terrible understanding. The humans had never intended to win this battle in any traditional sense. They had intended to create a legend that would outlive their species. Every human death had been a seed planted in the fertile ground of galactic consciousness. As the last hegemony ships jumped to hyperspace, they left behind a system transformed. Earth burned, its population decimated, its civilization shattered. But the humans had achieved something impossible. they had made the hegemony retreat. Word of that retreat would spread to every corner of the galaxy. 6 months later, Admiral Vexithara stood in the defendant's dock at her court-martial, charged with gross incompetence and dereliction of duty. The High Command needed a scapegoat for the greatest military disaster in hegemony history, and she had been chosen to bear that shame. "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" asked the presiding judge. Vexithara looked up at the assembled. Officers, beings from a dozen different species, all united in their service to the hegemony. But she could see something new in their eyes now. Doubt. Questions about the empire they served and the wars they fought. "The humans taught me something," she said finally. "They taught me that there are things worth dying for, principles worth fighting for even when victory is impossible. The hegemony conquers through fear, but the humans showed us what courage looks like." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Several junior officers exchanged glances, and Vexithara knew her words had found fertile ground. "You are hereby stripped of rank and sentenced to exile," the judge pronounced. "May the ancestors forgive your failure." As guards led her away, Vexithara caught sight of a young communications officer who had served aboard her flagship. The A officer met her eyes and nodded slightly, understanding passing between them. The seeds were already growing. Across the galaxy, in the subjugated systems that formed the backbone of the hegemony, word of Earth's resistance spread through underground networks and whispered conversations. Species that had accepted hegemony, rule for generations, began to remember what freedom meant. On the industrial world of Kethmora, workers in the munitions factories began sabotaging weapons shipments. On the agricultural planet of Vexthari, farmers started hiding food from hegemony tax collectors, small acts of defiance that grew bolder with each passing day. The rebellion began slowly, carefully, but it began, and at its heart was the story of a small blue planet whose people had chosen death over slavery, whose sacrifice had lit a fire that would burn across the stars. Earth was gone, its cities in ruins, its people scattered to the void in whatever ships they could build or steal. But the human spirit lived on in every act of defiance, every moment of resistance, every species that looked up at their alien overlords and whispered, "No." Commander Sarah Kim's daughter, one of the few survivors evacuated before the final bombardment, stood on the observation deck of the refugee ship Remembrance, looking back at the solar system that had been her home. Earth was just a distant point of light now, but she carried with her the memory of her mother's sacrifice and the promise that humans would return someday. "What do we do now?" asked another survivor, a child who had lost everything but his hope. Sarah. Kim Jr. smiled, her mother's determination burning in her young eyes. "Now we learn. We grow stronger, and we teach the galaxy what humans really are." The hegemony had won the battle for Earth, but in winning, they had lost something far more valuable, their monopoly on fear. Across the galaxy, the age of unquestioned authority was ending, and the age of rebellion was about to begin. The humans were gone, but humanity lived on in every being who chose freedom over safety, courage over submission. Earth's children had scattered to the stars, carrying with them the most dangerous weapon in the universe, the idea that even the smallest voices raised together could shake the foundations of heaven itself. 10 ships had survived to carry word of Earth's defiance back to the hegemony. They thought they were returning with news of victory. Instead, they brought the seeds of their empire's destruction, planted by a